Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Dairy Signal. We are so happy that you've joined us today to hear about your farm, your footprint, and some of our farmers that have gone through this program. Today is going to be a great discussion and dialogue, so make sure to answer all of your questions while we have our two farmers with us here for the next hour or so. But before we begin, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our national partners with professional dairy producers. Specifically, this month on the Dairy Signal, Zinpro. Zinpro has partnered with us to bring you this wonderful platform. And for over 50 years, Zinpro has been a leader in the research and development of performance trace minerals. Zinpro believes your herd's profitability depends on providing the right nutrition at the right time. Discover their industry-leading tools and solutions at zinpro.com. So huge thank you to Zinpro. But before we begin, again, just want to remind everyone about asking your questions today. With us, we have David Trimner and Paul Lippert. And we're going to start off by having these gentlemen first introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their farm. So, David, if you could begin.
Certainly. Thanks, Emily, and glad to be here. So, as you said, my name is David Trimner. I am co-owner and general manager over at Miltram Farms. This is my family farm, started in 1988. We grew over the last 30 some years to where we're at today, which is 3,200 milking cows, about 1,800 milked in robots, and 1,400 in our herringbone parlor. So we're the largest robotic dairy in Wisconsin. We also crop 5,200 acres, and all of that acreage is used to feed our cattle here on the farm.
All right. Well, thanks, David, and thank you in advance for your time today. Looking forward to the conversation. And Paul Lippert, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your farm.
Hi, I'm Paul Lippert. We milk 700 registered Holsteins and Jerseys in beautiful central Wisconsin, Pittsfield to be exact. We farm about 2,000 acres, and like I said, about 700 cows. And I'm also on the Professional Dairy Producers Board, currently serving as president. So I've been living and breathing this for about the last 5 years.
All right, and that leads right into our first question, Paul. So you were here in the boardroom when the initiative Your Farm, Your Footprint was first started. Can you talk about what Your Farm, Your Footprint is and why the board decided to start this initiative?
So Professional Dairy Producers tries to be forward-leaning and see what's next as far as what can dairy producers do to maintain market access and to make Wisconsin and the United States the leading provider of dairy to not just the United States, but the world. And so sustainability, is a buzzword that a lot of people couldn't divine or maybe made them nervous. And so we were trying just to make it, figure out what the nuts and bolts of it are, and to make sure that it worked for us as dairy farmers, and that we could kind of lead the conversation versus being told what it was. We wanted kind of to define it. So Your Farm, Your Footprint is professional dairy producers working on figuring out what sustainability means to dairy producers and what it means to our processors and grocery stores and everybody throughout that ecosystem. And so it's something that we worked on in the boardroom, and we worked with some professionals that really live and breathe in that space to collect data and kind of show where we are as dairy farmers as far as carbon scores and so on and so forth. So now that I got rid of all the buzzwords, basically, we believe that dairy producers are inherently always becoming more efficient, always making milk, as efficiently as possible, because we're running a business and also caring for the environment. So this is just an attempt to put a baseline on everything that we are already doing as dairy farmers. We just haven't actually measured it, because we know going forward, we're always going to be more efficient and therefore more sustainable.
Wonderful. Thanks, Paul, for that background. And yeah, we know our farmers are the most sustainable in the world, and this is just a way to prove it. And we like to refer to sustainability as a three-legged stool. So it's obviously the environment, which a lot of people only focus on the environment sometimes, but the environment, your people, making sure that you're caring for your team and your communities. And then, of course, in order to be a business, you also have to be financially sustainable as well, so profitable. So the three-legged stool that is profitability, environment, and people. And really, Your Farm, Your Footprint is a way to kind of encompass all of those aspects and get you a baseline score to prove those numbers. So then, David, you were not in the boardroom when this initiative was started. What intrigued you to participate in Your Farm, Your Footprint?
I think for us, Emily, a big part of it was first off just a bit of curiosity. We, carbon's been talked about for a long time now, and we knew that it was going to continue to be a bigger topic. And so we were curious as to where we would sit compared to our peers, and that was very informative. We were very happy to kind of learn that. But we also wanted to be ahead of the game when it came to knowing what our numbers were and making sure we were in a position to never need to be forced to do something that we weren't ready to do. And so again, I think for us, those were two key points. And then a third key point, of course, is how can we continue to improve our score? What does that look like? And what are some of those things we can do?
Wonderful. So now moving on to Paul, can you talk a little bit about the data collection process? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about the data collection process.
Yeah, data collection sounds scary, right? That's what makes everybody nervous. I'm here from the government. I want to help. Show me all your numbers. It's not nearly that scary. So the people doing the data collection, they do this for a living. So this isn't, sometimes you get people from your creamery that like 90% of their job is to collect, to make sure that your milk is clean and everything like that, right? And then they're like, oh, by the way, collect this data. The people that collect this data, that's what they do for a living. So the guy collecting the agronomist data is an agronomist. The person collecting the dairy side of the data, they live and breathe dairy, right? So they speak your language. And I think that's super important, right? And they realize that we don't all talk about things exactly the same, right? So when I say ECM, they don't look at me like they don't know what I'm talking about. Pounds per cow, tons per acre, all that kind of stuff. They understand what, we vetted them and we know what we're talking about, but they'll take the data in any format that you have it. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet, they'll take it that way. If you're more advanced and you have some software, or possibly your agronomist is just going to talk to them and they're going to bypass you completely. They can if you give them the login, they can log in your creamery and pull that kind of data. Whatever, if it's on a notebook or on a napkin and you scribbled it down during breakfast, they'll take it that way, right? And then the important thing is once they've consumed all that, they're going to go through it. And if they have questions, they're going to come back to you. So you trust the data when you get it back, right? It's not just we sent it to them, they send it back to you and you go, well, that doesn't seem right. They're going to verify the numbers they get because there's always going to be some questions, right? And that way, when you get a score back, you can trust that what went into it was good because, good data in, good data out.
Absolutely. And can you talk about why is sharing your data confidentiality? How you talk a little bit about that side of it, Paul?
Yeah, so this data is your data. They're not sharing it with anybody. There are other initiatives going on, right? That maybe you have to. I'm not saying you shouldn't do them, but you always got to know like who is the end consumer of that data, right? So if you choose not to share this with anybody, then you don't have to share it with anybody. Some of us will run to the creamery and say, hey, look at this, right? Some of us will say, okay, we want to think about this. We want to know how this affects us in the future. And we're just going to keep it in our back pocket and we're not going to share it with anybody. But that data is yours. And we know that, data is power and we have a lot of data on dairy farms and we're cognizant that that's important and we need to, that you decide where your data goes.
Absolutely. And with it being your data, your farm, your footprint, there is some cost involved for farms. We do have grants available that will cover up to $97.50 of the total cost that will go to offset getting your environmental scores. So farms up to 2,500 acres just have to pay $1 per acre to participate in your farm, your footprint. And with that kind of leads into our next question. So for both David and Paul, when you went through your farm, your footprint, did you calculate all of your acres and why or why not? Or why did you choose to do that? So David, if we'll start with you on that question.
Yeah, so when we originally started the program, there wasn't as strong a funding. So we decided to stick with half our acres, trying to balance that half to look as similar as possible to the other half. So we chose to do that because just for cost reasons. And we actually ended up getting most of our money back because that extra funding was given back to the people who did the program in the past. So that was very nice. But today, honestly, today I'd probably do it all. It's really economical now. And I'd probably do every acre just to get the most accurate that I can possible. But I think that that's kind of why we went the way we did.
Yes, so we farm about 2,000 acres, and we did run every acre through the program because we were a low enough number that we had cost sharing on all those acres. But like David said, if you farmed a bunch more acres, you could just say, well, let's come up with a subset of acres that's a valid representative of everything else, and you're still going to have a very good representation of what your number would be. And the reason the cost is per acre is because this program does look at all of your acres, right? So we have acres that are in pasture for heifers. We have acres that are corn, bean, wheat rotations. We have acres that are grass, right? So it's not so simple of a model that they just say, "What's your rotation?" and they just base it off of some vague idea of what you might do, right? A lot of us have a lot of different rotations going on in our farms, depending on what kind of ground we farm, if we have heifers or not, so on and so forth. So we think that the model is much more powerful, that it actually takes all of your acres into account, and it actually looks at all of them. And so you get a lot better data out of it. But that's why we did all of the acres.
Oh, it looks like you and I are on our own. So I do have the questions. We're going to keep moving. So I'll ask you and then I'll respond. Next one is how have you used the data, and has it provided any new opportunities for your farm?
How have we used the data? So I'll admit I haven't shared my data with a lot of people yet. I find it's very important just to inform me and what we're thinking about in the future. It's just one more data point that I use to make decisions and try to figure out where we're going, right? Just like, milk per cow doesn't define everything you do in your business, or, what your manure hauling cost doesn't define everything you do in your business, or how many bushels of corn you get, right? This is just a tool in your toolbox, right? To help you go forward. I truly believe that this number, if we'd have done it 15, 20 years ago, that we'd have shown a huge leap in some of these cuts that people are asking for, from dairy. I think we'd be well on our way. So we continue to do things that make us more efficient as a dairy. And also the people that did this for us, I count them as advisors. So if I'm thinking about a project, tunnel ventilating my barn, or changing how we handle our manure, I can go back to those people and say, if I did this, how would this affect my number, right? And no, that's not going to make that entire decision for me, but it's just going to help me spend money, that I'm going to get the most bang for my buck, I suppose. What about you, David?
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think that's an interesting point you made. For us, we didn't start doing some of our practices, you could say, until 2015, 2014. And so I'd be curious, what does 2010 Miltrum Farms look like? Particularly one on that practices basis, but also just on the milk per cow, how many cows are milking, what that looks like. That'd be really interesting. When it comes to the data, we started to look at how we can use it to continue to, I guess for us, maybe change practices out on the field when it comes to how do we do a better job of cover cropping? What kind of species of cover crops are we planting? That's something that we've looked at. And then the other big one is how do we handle our hay mix, which right now we air seeded on. So that one is a tough one because I've talked to farmers who use what's called an air drill, and they wonder, should we go to an air seeder, which is what I have. And so we'll see what we think there. But we are also working on a digester, which I'll actually lead that, Paul, into the next question is, will you recalculate your scores? And if so, how often or why not?
So as far as recalculating scores, like I said, I truly believe that the baseline is the most important score because I'm confident we're going to show progress with that. Some of us ship to creameries that are going to want this data more often than others. Either they their customer base is more worried about it, or they just have a different business sense, right? My co-op's not overly advanced in that, so until somebody comes and says, "Hey, we'd like to do some scoring," then I'm probably not going to do it, right? I'm probably on an every 5-year schedule, I would guess. I don't think things have changed rapidly enough around here that I need to do it every year. But I think still just want to reiterate that the primary, getting that baseline, so whenever we redo the score, we can show how much advancement we've made. I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, I'd agree, Paul. And I kind of thought that same thing. I done my 2023 year, and so I felt like by 2028, I'm hoping we have a digester. I can rerun my numbers, and we can see how big of an impact was that, along with the incremental changes we've been making. Again, back to the cropping side, how much our cows producing by then on a per cow basis, and what that looks like. So it'll be interesting, but I would totally agree with kind of a 5-year timeline. You do any sooner, and you're probably overdoing it. But and back to actually the data portion. Why do we think this data matters, and what do we think will be the future of carbon as a whole in the dairy industry? I'll let you answer first.
If I had a crystal ball, which I don't, I'm still not sure it would be totally clear what's going to happen with carbon, right? Some people listening to this are going to say, "Oh, it's a buzzword. Why do we care?" Some people are going to be all about it. It's probably somewhere in between the two. We know that everything that matters to the public or to the government, or all of the different people that have a stake in the dairy industry, these things ebb and flow. But in general, we're always going towards more environmental sustainability and environmental stewardship, right? So it was clean water, right? We've done a lot for clean water. Now it's what kind of, what's our carbon footprint as far as like what are we emitting, right? And greenhouse gases, so on and so forth, right? That conversation ebbs and flows, but we're always worried about like how it affects our communities, the ground we farm, our neighbors, right? That I don't think will ever change. Will we talk about it as specifically carbon all the time? It probably depends on who you're talking to, right? So what do I think the future is? Some people are going to take a lot of advantage of it and maybe make money off of this. I really do think that dairy farmers are well placed to be a leader as far as making food and making the planet a better place. And that's why this is so important. But carbon, as far as like if you can make money off of it, or if we're going to talk about carbon specifically, or just environment and our effect on it, right? That it changes depending on who you talk to. But in general, I'm blabbing on here. I apologize, David. What are your thoughts on it?
You're fine, Paul. I would agree. It'd be interesting. Like you said, I don't think it's going to stop, but I'd like to think we're going to go about it better than, say, what the Europeans have, which is, in some instances, a drastic decrease in fertilizer or a massive call off in animal units. I don't think that's the right way to go about it, because the reality is, I think the biggest thing that makes a country secure is their ability to produce their own food. And some of these countries in Europe have actually started to delve into that, where they're potentially importing food now because they can't make enough. And that's a tricky situation when you've got some not so friendly neighbors. But back to the US idea, of course, every administration has a little bit of a different way to think about it. So there's going to be the ebbs and flow of that. But yeah, I think we're going to keep moving forward. And I think, like most in life, if you're not at least slowly moving forward, you're probably starting to float backwards. And so I think from my perspective, doing this program has helped you and I really continue to move upstream versus start to float backwards, while the whole conversation as a whole is still slowly moving forwards in a pretty slow manner. So, and then the other reality is I know on our farm we have been able to utilize carbon credits to make some investment and make some money, which is nothing crazy, but it definitely helps pay for seed. It helps pay for some of the cover crop practices, knowing that I'm also going to get some benefit, of course, in the field as well. So I think it's a big part of it. What are your biggest challenges on the farm when it comes to implementing conservation practices?
Biggest challenges on the farm, well, costs and mind shift of like how we do things. I would say those are the two hardest things, right? So certain changes don't involve a lot of cost, but maybe they involve a large, change in how we think. I would argue that going from, a lot of tillage to reduced till or even no till, depending on the acre or the farm, and a lot of times saves money, but convincing the people that drive the tractors and the custom harvesters and the agronomists that, this is something we should try, that sometimes is harder, right? Um, what was the question again, David? That was just about challenges.
Biggest challenges on the farm
Yeah.
when you're implementing.
And David and I both fallen into this trap that we talk about cover crops a lot when we talk about this. And I want everybody to know that, like, just because you do this program doesn't mean you need to be, oh, we have to cover crop, right? That is just one facet of a lot of things that make a farm, that go into your score, right? Yields, nitrogen efficiency, how much fertilizer you use, how you value your manure, all these things matter. How much milk, how efficient your cows are turning feed into milk. Whether you graze or not, what your manure storage is like. Those are all things. And any change in the farm, I would say, is challenging, right? So I wouldn't say that the challenge really have to do with this program whatsoever. It's just always moving ahead and doing things that you're not comfortable with can always be challenging.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the other thing that people also have to remember is as a dairy farmer, you're ahead of the game because you naturally have potentially a third to up to half your acres in a cover crop, which is your perennial hay, because that is absolutely a permanent cover and the best kind. And so that's always a big bonus that you see. And it's one of the reasons why we continue to try to work with our local neighbors who might be cash grain guys to throw a little hay in their mix because it's better for their land. And then we also get more access to hopefully good high quality hay because it's always good to have a good supply of that. But back to the question, biggest challenges on the farm for us, we are a very heavy clay soil. And so that comes with its own challenges and trying to learn how far is too far when it comes to how we push these practices. And we've definitely taken some L's, some losses on trying to push things too far, trying to no-till at one point almost at all cost, realizing that you can't do that. You've got to focus on that profitability side because if you do, you're going to naturally flow towards conservation because there's a lot of things, as you were talking about, Paul, a lot of things, excessive tillage that we've done that costs money that we absolutely did not need to do. And so it's finding that critical balance, I think, of how much conservation tillage or minimal tillage do we need to do so that our seedbed prep is good so we can grow good corn silage or have a good hay stand, etc. So for us, that's definitely the biggest challenge, finding that balance, making sure we're not overdoing it just for the sake of conservation. Because as folks at PDP like to say a lot, if you're in the red, it's hard to be green. And so you gotta be in the green for both that financial and your practices. So
yeah, and on that note too, Paul kind of alluded to it with the efficiency gains, that is all sustainability. And so with your farm, your footprint, we do have this unique opportunity with tier 2, we call it. So tier 1 is all about getting your scores, finding your baseline, being engaged within a peer group. And then tier 2 is kind of the next step. So for those that would like to participate, you do have to be within the Nestle Milk Shed, as they are one of our partners on your farm, your footprint. If you have any questions at all about that specific part, please call our office. But you, with tier 2, you have the opportunity to find opportunities within your farm. So whether that be on the conservation side or the cow comfort side, the list goes on and on. There are already set options, but then also you can kind of dream a little bit and think about what might be beneficial for your farm, and almost create a wish list in terms of potential cost share opportunities. So that is something with tier 2 to hopefully try to help overcome some potential challenges on your farm. But ultimately, if you're interested in that, make sure that you participate in tier 1, which is all about getting your scores to start. So with that, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation here with David and Paul. But I guess we'll start, Paul, with you, and then we'll go to David. What is your biggest takeaway from participating in Your Farm, Your Footprint?
My biggest takeaway is that don't always assume that a certain practice is going to have the effect on your carbon score if you were that you think. There are a lot of environmental effects that honestly aren't in all of our controls, right? What kind of ground do you farm? Where are you farming? Manure storage, you kind of control, right? But if you have a manure pit and you store manure for 6 months out of the year, versus if you're somebody that daily applies or grazes, right, that has a huge effect on your score. And there's not a lot you're going to do in the short term to change that. And you might assume that the pit is better than the daily haul, but that may not be true either. So don't convince yourself that, oh, you'll have a bad score, or oh, you'll have a good score, or I have to have a digester because, let's just face it, it's not feasible for all of us, right? Or I have to be 100% cover crop for this to be a good thing to do. None of those things are true. And the other thing is that we're not trying to compete with our neighbors. I know we're all competitive as dairy farmers and honestly as Americans sometimes, but we're just trying to put America, to be the leading provider of dairy products for the world, right? To maintain our market access, since close to 20% of our milk solids at this point go, across international borders. So we need to just find out what this score is, even if you have one that's lower or higher than your neighbor. Doesn't matter as much as that we just show that we're really efficient, environmentally minded farmers in the United States, and that people should want to buy our dairy products.
David?
That's all I got. Did I not answer the question?
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. David, it was almost like a mic drop moment, but it was perfect, Paul. David, how about you?
Yeah, biggest takeaways. Paul had some great points there. When it comes to the different things that you do, some have varying impacts from others. One thing for us is we've converted some diesel motors over to electric motors, which are absolutely a positive thing. One, on the environmental side, but if you can do it, electric motors are way more efficient and way less running cost. But on the grand scheme on the farm, they're pretty small impact, just because power generation, power usage isn't a huge impact. Then the other thing I would say, again, is I was able to have a peer group meeting, which was, of course, set up by PDP after we had all of our information. And I had some great discussions with farmers on the tools they're using, for example, to seed their hay down versus what we use. And we were thinking the exact opposite of, we had the opposite tools and thought we needed to switch to the other tool that we were each using. So there's a lot of nuance to this. And so we're continuing to think through those. I'm excited to continue to kind of pursue these objectives and see where we can go as a farm. And like Paul said, continue to make America the best place to buy your dairy products from.
Wonderful. Well, thank you two gentlemen for your time today. And just want to reiterate what they've all said, that they both said, is that really we know you guys are the most sustainable in the world, and Your Farm, Your Footprint just gives you a way to prove it. And we know you're continually making efficiency gains day in and day out, to be a profitable business. And so ultimately the time is now to get your environmental scores, as you're just going to keep getting better and better. So might as well show that progress that you're making. If you have any questions at all about Your Farm, Your Footprint, head on over to our website, pdpw.org, or give our office a call. We're always here to help you. We just love connecting farmers with other farmers with resources. That's our job, is to connect people, and Your Farm, Your Footprint is a way for you to be connected with a resource that is all about putting farmers in the driver's seat for the sustainability world that we're all living in. Again, just want to say thank you to Paul and David for being with us today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Also want to say a huge thank you to our national partners with professional dairy producers who are with us year in and year out and make programs like the Dairy Signal possible. To learn about them, as well as our wonderful sponsor for the month of November, Zinpro for the Dairy Signal, head on over to PDP Prime on our website. Also, tomorrow is Dairy Wellbeing Workshop up in Green Bay tomorrow and Thursday. So if that's something that's interested, there's just a few spots available. Make sure to check that out on our website as well. But for now, I'll stop rambling and we'll see you on Thursday back here on the Dairy Signal. Bye now.